California task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. Content warning. Contains discussions of racial discrimination, sexual assault, torture, lynching, and other forms of extreme violence. Contains unedited historical quotations and photographs of white supremacist hatred, torture, lynching, autopsy, and other forms of graphic violence.
Criminalization of Black youth. More likely to be exposed to the criminal legal system as a result of racism and over-policing. 96 in recent years, these disparities have often gotten worse. 197 in 2018. While Black youth made up 16% of the youth population, the rate of arrest of Black youth was 2.6 times that of white youth, and Black youth accounted for 50% of all youth arrests for violent crimes. 98 once charged with a crime, Black youth are at risk of harsher prosecution, detention, and punishment. 99 Black youth are transferred to adult court at a much higher rate than white youth. 18. While Black youth only accounted for 35% of all cases, they made up more than 51% of transfers from the juvenile court system to adult court. Black girls are 3.5 times more likely to be incarcerated than their white peers. 301 Black girls also comprise 34% of girls in residential placements, but accounted for 15% of the population. 302 A 2016 study found that for youth serving life without parole sentences in the United States, twice as many individuals were Black as white. 3 Law enforcement and other government agencies across America often treat Black youth as adults, or as less than human, in myriad ways. Research confirms that law enforcement often overestimates the age of Black youth when they are suspected of a felony based on contact with police. 4 One study found that Black boys are perceived as older than they are and less innocent than their white peers. 5. School policing. 50 states, public schools, including elementary schools, employ student resource officers, which often do not go by the title of police. 6 Proponents of school policing have long tied this practice to fears after deadly mass shootings in places like Columbine High School, while some scholars have argued its prevalence is linked to white fear of Black youth under the guise of protecting school children. 7 In either case, over the past several decades, the number of law enforcement officers on school campuses throughout the United States has skyrocketed. 1975, the number of U.S. schools with police presence on campus was only 1%. By 2016, there were 27,000 school resource officers patrolling U.S. schools, up from about 9,400 in 1997. 309 This equated to sworn officers in approximately 36% of elementary schools, 67.6% of middle schools, and 72% of high schools in the 2017-18 school year. 310 This is at least partially due to a dramatic increase in federal funding for school police. 111 Congress passed Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act in 1994 to increase federal involvement in school policing and safety. 312 The law provided massive federal aid for policing at the state and local level and in schools. 313 15-16 school year, Black students were arrested at 3 times the rate of white students, while only comprising 15% of the population in schools. 14 This disparity widens for Black girls, who make up 17% of the school population, but are arrested at 3.3 times the rate of white girls. 315 This is at least partially explained by findings that Black girls are seen by authorities and teachers as disobedient or disruptive for similar but accepted behaviors from white children. 116 Moreover, schools have historically disciplined clothing trends popular among Black youth, including sagging, oversized, and baggy clothes. 17 Police played a role in creating a narrative in schools that sagging was a symbol of gang activity, and school officials proceeded to ban sagging as a way to prevent gang violence, graffiti, and create safe environments for kids, thereby further targeting Black youth. 118 See Chapter 6, Separate and Unequal Education, for more information on the so-called school-to-prison pipeline. 5 students in the U.S. will develop mental health challenges that rise to the level of a diagnosis. 119 Yet, around the country, schools are more likely to employ law enforcement than mental health counselors, and black students are 3 times more likely than their white peers to have police in their school but no psychologist. 20 black male youth with disabilities in the 2015-16 school year had an arrest rate of 5 times the rate of the whole population. 21. Graph taken by the Federal Security Agency. Youth Administration. The original caption stated, Oakland, California. High school youth. 2 Negro youngsters look over the shoulders of a couple of fortunate enough to own a model plane. The white boys can hope to become aviators, 1940. National Youth Administration, National Archives. 2015-16 school year, black students were arrested at 3 times the rate of white students, while only comprising 15% of the population in schools. Is at least partially explained by findings that black girls are seen by authorities and teachers as disobedient or disruptive for similar but accepted behaviors from white children. 186. Chapter 8 Pathologizing Black Families. Justice System. Of schools, black youth face disproportionate harms through various aspects of the juvenile justice system. 2021 study by researchers from the University of California, Berkeley, found that black youth in the 10 to 14 age group are injured in police-related incidents at 5.3 times the rate for boys and 6 times the rate for girls, compared to their white peers. 322 The study suggested that especially among black girls, this disparity could be due to how black girls are adultified compared to white girls and perceived of as older. 123 scholars have noted similar adultification of black boys, who at 10 years old are perceived as less childlike, less innocent, and 4.5 years older than their white counterparts. 124 Because of this perception of black children as older and less innocent, they are seen as more responsible for their actions than white children who engage in the same behaviors. 125 Both black boys and girls are also perceived as more dangerous than their white peers, though the magnitude of the bias has been shown to be stronger for boys than girls. 326. Oddly, as discussed in Chapter 11, an unjust legal system of this report, African American youth are more than 4 times as likely to be detained or committed in juvenile facilities as their white peers. 27 Youth who are stopped more frequently by police are more likely to report feelings such as anger, fear, and stigma, and shame. 328 More invasive stops led to increased feelings. Emotional distress and trauma, including post-traumatic stress after the stop. 329 Stress among youth involved in police stops is not contingent on whether they were engaging in any misconduct. 330. On drugs, in the 1980s and 90s had an outsized impact on black youth. White youth use drugs at the same or higher rate as black youth, but black youth are disproportionately prosecuted through drug cases in juvenile courts. 31 Again, this was largely enabled by the federal government. In 1990, Congress passed legislation authorizing Department of Defense resources to be used to combat drug activity by state and local agencies, including public schools. 32 In 2014, schools in states such as California, Florida, and Texas reported receiving military-grade equipment through the department's program. 33. Facing mental health problems or crises are also funneled into the juvenile justice system in ways white children facing similar issues are not. 334 Even when black youth receive mental health treatment, in addition to incarceration, they are more likely to be inappropriately diagnosed and medicated than their white peers. 335. Juvenile justice system, outreach to families is inadequate. 136 Police and facility outreach to parents is usually limited to notice that their child has an upcoming court appearance, without more information such as why an arrest was made or the circumstances of their child's confinement. 37 The bail system for youth in the criminal legal system is also deeply flawed. Courts rarely consider what a family can actually afford when setting bail, and bail is regularly set between $100 to $500 for children. 338. California. Discussed above apply to California's history and present treatment of black youth, although there has been some modern pushback to these approaches. California Attorney General investigations and settlements with California school districts, e.g., the Barstow Unified School District, the Oroville City School District, and the Oroville Union High School District are all representative of continued targeting of black youth. 139 investigations at these districts showed that black students were more likely to be punished and/or suspended, and were subjected to greater punishments than similarly situated peers of other races. 340 districts have taken proactive steps to change outdated approaches. For example, the Oakland School Board voted to remove security officers from schools in June 2020. 341 Before this vote, school officer practices were governed by a policy and procedure manual that described them as having a calming presence in the school. 142 The manual also included authorization for officers to restrain students, search students and their property, and even detain individuals if they had reason to believe a crime had been committed. 43 All of these powers, and the school police enforcing them, have disproportionate harmful impacts on black students. Specific research has determined that schools with larger police presences lead to decreased instruction for black students, likely because police discipline and monitoring contributes to a climate that is incompatible with learning. 344 California still allows law enforcement discretion to add youth over the age of 12 to a gang database as long as two of the following factors, under certain limitations and requirements, are found: admission of gang activity, identification of a gang tattoo. Identification in a gang area, any known association with gang members, clothing associated with a gang, arrest for typical gang activity, or display of gang signals. 345 In California, public defenders and youth advocates estimate that police have tracked children as young as 10 for suspected gang activity. 146 Profile incident related to the policing of black children. In May 2019, police in Sacramento chased down a black 12-year-old child who they claimed was asking people to buy goods he was selling, and forcefully detained him while he was calling for his mom. 147 One police officer covered his face with a mesh sack and forced him on the ground with a knee on his back while an officer put a knee on his thigh.